Hello, sports fans, and welcome to our new program, Tuesdays on the Edge, our version of Overreaction Monday. I'm Rowdy, and joining me as always is the fantastic Big Boy and the always interesting Coop. How we doing, boys?
Good, good.
Pretty good. Just got off of a rivalry football week, so it was good.
Great week. Great weekend of football for sure.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, if you've been tuning into these Tuesdays on the Edge, obviously by now these usually come out Tuesday night, but we had a special circumstance this week. We have a special guest joining us tonight for the whole segment of Tuesday on the Edge, and that is the very own Eric Henry. Some of y'all may remember him from coming on a couple podcasts ago. He's going to be joining us again here in a couple minutes to talk all things college football playoff. As we're recording this right now, the rankings just came out not too long ago. You will be seeing this the next day. So that's fresh on everyone's mind, as well as some Texas football going into a big weekend. And of course, a little bit of Texas basketball as that keeps heating up as well. But with that being said, he's going to be joining us here in a couple minutes. But yeah, guys, how are we feeling after that Tech game?
Feel great about it after the Tech game. I think we went out there. I'm still concerned about the offense scoring touchdowns, but hey, man, they did what we were all at the game. The best environment of a game I've been to. I think maybe since Ricky broke the record. I mean, I'm serious. It was awesome. And
well, so, I mean, here's what I say. You know, the rankings just came out. The committee likes Oregon. All right, listen. The only thing Texas and Oregon have in common are what? Texas Tech. How much did Oregon beat Texas Tech by? 8 points. How much did Texas beat Tech by? 50 points. So, you know, they don't have a lot of things in common, but that's the one thing they do have in common. And, hey, 8 points to 50 points. I don't care if it's in Lubbock or in Austin. I don't care where it's at. 50 points is 50 points.
They have more ranked wins. They have – stronger strength of schedule. They have a lot of things over Oregon.
Oh, but, for sure.
Easily. I don't know, man. It's the writing was on the wall though because they've been ahead of Texas the whole time. So it's not a surprising thing now.
But like why though? Why?
I think the only bad thing that we talked about it last week is Ohio State still staying about ranked before Texas too, which obviously that should change if Texas goes and wins this weekend. There's no way you can keep a team who didn't even play in the conference championship over a winner of a conference championship. So that's whatever. I mean, it still is going to boil down to Texas winning. I think they need to win a little bit more handedly, like we talked about, like at least 14. I mean, they at least need to cover that spread. I mean, I'd love nothing more, and I'm sure they love nothing more than to go and do what they just did to Tech, because if you don't put them in, obviously if Louisville loses, right, if they don't get in after that, man, I mean, that's
if
bad.
Florida State wins, it's over.
Yeah.
Basically. I mean, it'd be crazy. Maybe some craziness would happen. I even think that Georgia needs to beat Bama. Because, man, I know we beat Bama and all that, but, man, the way things are going, like,
oh, yeah.
No.
Well, I mean, I think if Florida State wins and Oregon wins, Michigan wins, and Bama wins, I mean, Bama's going to get that last spot over Georgia, I think. I think Bama's they're probably going to jump us. And
what about if we win?
I know, but I mean, you would hope. That's the only thing is they've had Texas ranked ahead of them all year.
How can you keep Bama out too? That's I mean, it's so hard to keep Bama out, and they can say they don't look at the last year, but that's
that's what they're going to look at, because that's the reason why Oregon's still ranked at Texas. Like, they're just looking at the eye test. And I mean, if you go beat Georgia, I mean, I'm sorry, like, you should have to be put in. Like, it's tough, yeah, because you're ranked behind Texas who beat you, but there's just no way they're not going to have an SEC team in the playoffs. So,
and do you have 2 SEC teams in there? Do you say, oh, sorry, Florida State, and it's Michigan and the Big Ten winner? I don't know.
I mean, simple thing for Texas, like we mentioned all week. And this will be the first time there's never been a number 7 or number 8 team in the playoff era to at this time make the playoffs, but we're going to get a little bit more of it soon right now. Joining us now is Eric Henry, senior writer over at Horns 24/7. How are we doing, Eric?
What's going on, fellas? How's it going?
Hey, Eric, good. Good. How you doing?
Doing all right, fellas. Can't complain. Big week for us, right? Big 12 game.
Huge
Very
week.
big week. That's what we were just talking about that a little bit. Of course, the playoff rankings just came out. We're going to get to that a little bit later. We got some questions for you when it comes to that, but we'll get started right away. Looking back on last week's game, obviously big game for the Horns at home, senior day. What are your quick thoughts on that performance from UT?
Hell of a performance. I mean, listen, there's no doubt about it. You talk to those guys during the week, they didn't acknowledge it. You talk to them after the game, they acknowledged it. They were fired up by Brett Yormark's comments. There's no doubt about that. The fact that the commissioner of the Big 12 was in the house, they wanted to use Steve Sarkisian's words, put on a show. We found out from guys like Jahdae Barron, T. Sweat, and others that they actually lifted to the sound of Brett Yormark's comments. They had it played on a loop inside the weight room. They wanted to be known as far as what Brett Yormark said. There's no doubt that really inspired. I think the biggest things on field as far as takeaways for me were, one, just the fact that this running back room has stepped up in the absence of Jonathan Brooks. I mean, we all knew CJ Baxter. We talked about it, last time I was on with him being the RB1 coming out of camp, and we saw the potential from CJ. We saw the flashes of the explosiveness, but just really putting it together and the consistency was one thing. He showed a little bit of that at Iowa State. But what I really liked was Jaden Blue, Savion Red, everyone, Keelan Robinson catching those swing passes out of the backfield, getting there, and then him hitting the home run in the return game as well. It feels like all the pieces are starting to come together for Texas. When last time we talked, and even earlier in the year, it felt like whether it was the team would start fast and then start slow and then finish fast. And then the last few weeks, they'd start fast and then kind of, finish slow in the second half, or, be kind of putting all the pieces together. It feels like the Texas Tech game was the most complete performance of the year for the Longhorns. And we'll see how they can roll that into Oklahoma State, because they're going to have another great rusher to stop in Ollie Gordon.
Yeah, no doubt. I got a question. If you heard anything about Quinn's health, it seems like he was taking some of those sacks where he could have maybe ran and got out of it. It seems like he's been a little timid to run since the shoulder injury. Do we know what percentage he is?
Yeah, I mean, Big Boy, I'll tell you this. Here's the best way I can answer that question. After Quinn got hurt and when he made his return to Iowa State, we didn't get Quinn on Mondays. It was basically said to us, he's not available. We got Quinn this Monday. So that at least says to me that if he's at least up for doing the Monday availability and he's not back in the facility, getting rehab worked on, he's getting closer to 100%. Now, to your point, I do absolutely believe that part of the reason he's not, and you remember this earlier in the year when he'd get in those 3rd and 6th, 3rd and 7s, and Quinn might sneak out, right? Slide up slide up in the pocket, run for a first down. We're not seeing as much of that now. I do think that's a direct byproduct of the fact that Quinn got, the AC joint injury. He's been banged up. I don't want to say it's been a direct order from Sark. We haven't asked him that directly, whether they told him not to run, but I do think he's protecting himself in that sense. But to your question, yeah, I think because of the fact he showed up on Monday and he wasn't, needed for extra treatment or anything like that, he's getting closer to 100%.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, like you said, I mean, he broke out on those runs at the start of the season. I mean, those 3 touchdown runs, they were big. But looking back on this last game, we saw a lot more, especially obviously Ryan Watts going out first play of the game, tough injury, Malik stepping up, stepping in, all the corners really. What do you think has been the change on why there's been so much more press coverage now from the corners than there had been recently?
It's funny you mentioned that, Rowdy, because we just finished taping our Horns 24/7 podcast, and Chip Brown and I both agreed. Manny Muhammad looks better in press right now. He's not a guy, if you see his style of play, he's a young guy, definitely confident in his abilities. We saw that even going to fall camp. He's someone who views himself as, I want to play man-on-man, one-on-one, let me lock down that guy. So I think as a result, that's been, the reason why you've seen some press coverage. I think he excels in that a little more than a guy like Gavin Holmes, who when he's out there, the Wake Forest transfer. I think he's someone who excels a little bit more in kind of that off coverage. And even Ryan Watts. I mean, Ryan being the boundary corner, of course, he kind of has the responsibility, everything that comes that side in the run game. I think he excels a little. I don't want to say excels more because I think Ryan's the most complete corner. But I think, he's someone who kind of excels a little bit more in that press. And even Jade, if you guys have noticed, Jade Barron has, on certain snaps, it's been based off what the offense has given them. But Jade has slid play outside, and they've moved Mo Blackwell inside to play nickel, right? But all of that's been predicated on the being up and playing press. So I think, in my mind, to answer your question, a lot of it is predicated on Manny Muhammad and the fact that that's just what he excels at best, and letting the rest of the cornerbacks in the secondary kind of fit in as they around Manny in that sense.
Sure. Now, looking forward to this week's game against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, they're giving up 176 rushing yards and 250 passing yards. Do you think this is going to be more of a Baxter and Blue type of game, or do you think Quinn's just going to go in there and light it up?
To be honest with you, Coop, and I don't want to disrespect the Cowboys, but you're 112th in the nation in total yards allowed, last in the Big 12. My lowly UCF Knights lit them up for 500 and something yards. I'm expecting this to be an everything game, just to be honest with you. The reason I mentioned that UCF game is, again, I talked about this on the podcast earlier today, and I talked about it on radio on Monday. You can draw some direct parallels to UCF. Very poor man's version, but you look at Javon Baker, the Alabama transfer, he's a poor man's Xavier Worthy, right, in the way he plays. He's a 6-foot, 160-pound receiver. He tests, torches Oklahoma State secondary, 4 grabs, 112 yards. If you just look at the way they use them, it's very much in the way that Texas uses X. RJ Harvey, their running back, who rushed for 1,200 yards this year, ran for 200 and something yards as a whole. UCF ran for 300 and something yards against Oklahoma State. So to your question, I'm expecting this to be an everything game. Yeah, you might feel a little more confident if JB were back there, Jonathan Brooks be in the backfield, but there's another JB who's stepping up, and that's Jaden Bloom. You got to like the explosiveness that he's providing there in the backfield as well, with CJ, Jaden Blue, Savion Red, and the Wildcat. So, yeah, man, I mean, I'm honestly expecting – I'm not sitting here saying it's going to be a 57-7 blowout, but I don't think Texas is going to have any struggles moving the football. I know Sark was really complimentary of Oklahoma State's linebackers, Colin Oliver and Nick Martin, 2 guys who play behind the line of scrimmage. You take a look at their numbers on the year. In total, they both combined for over 30 tackles for loss. But there's no one on that defense that really scares you, and their secondary, as you mentioned, has been bad this year.
Yeah. Hopefully they can light it up like that and the committee take notice. But it's all right, UT's third down defense is still number 1 in the nation, and the rushing defense is holding teams to 85 yards a game. Do you think Gundy's still gonna try to run the ball with Gordon or try to let Bowman, get off?
Big boy, did you happen to catch Mike Gundy's quote earlier this week?
No, what'd he say?
I don't know why teams feel insistent on riling up T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, but when Mike Gundy was asked by the local presser in Stillwater, how are you going to block T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, his quote was, well, I can try to double team them, and maybe that will let some of the edges come free and make plays, or I'm just going to do what I've been doing for the past 15 years, and we're going to block them. Oh, yeah, well, good luck with that, because you got 12 teams who tried to block T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. They haven't had much success. So to your question, seemingly Mike Gundy's going to try to run. And if you look at, I think to make a serious point, if you take a look at the way Texas Tech uses Taj Brooks, it's about 50-50 zone run plays and gap run plays, right? So a little bit of trying to get outside, a little bit of trying to get inside. And Taj is a little bit more of a patient running back, right? He's a guy who's going to kind of stretch out those plays a little bit and then look for his hole and run. With Ollie Gordon, he's a gap running back, one cut and go. All the linebackers, all the defensive players for Texas have noted he's a guy who, out of that pistol formation, that pistol-esque kind of formation, he's gonna get the ball, make his one cut and go. So they're gonna look to test the Texas defensive line. I don't see that working well, but with that being said, I guess you got to stick to what got you here at 9-3. So more power to them, but I don't see about just blocking them, because you got 12 other teams who've tried and it hasn't worked.
Yeah, we'll definitely see with that. It's a big matchup, obviously, for UT, for its playoffs hopes, and some other things have to happen as well. But before we kind of move on to something else with not so much this game this weekend, do you have a little score prediction for us? You got a little score prediction?
You guys put me on the hook here. I haven't even given my prediction to the site, so this will be an exclusive for y'all. No, if I had to give a score prediction, I'm big on trends. I'm big on averages. I mean, even when I was not a college football player at the level of Division I. You know, I played Division II football at Jacksonville University before I went to UCF, but I've always been big into numbers and trends. And if you take a look at Texas' scoring average, right around 35, 36 points per game. You take a look at what they've allowed, pretty much been static. So I'm looking at something like Texas 38, Oklahoma State 17.
Okay. I like it. I like that. So with that being said, we know the portal's about to open up next week, even though people are already going crazy on Twitter with entering the portal. Some people are already talking about where they're going to go next. Are there any guys possibly already looking or to leave from Texas, or guys from outside from other schools looking to come into Texas that you've kind of heard of so far?
I want to be clear. I haven't heard of anything. We've had a couple rumblings. Our guys, if you're not following already, I'll give a shout out. Matt Zenitz on Twitter, Chris Hummer on Twitter, our transfer reporter guys, 24/7 Sports, do a great job. Right now, we're kind of in that period where, you know, they're kind of floating us some names in our Slack chat, and we kind of float them some positions of need that we think, you know, because listen, guys, we're past the days of thinking this isn't free agency. This is college football's version of free agency. You identify a need, you go find a player, right? I think the big name that has kind of been out there, a lot of people are thinking Evan Stewart, right? From Texas A&M, you know, with the coaching change. I haven't quite heard that yet. I think a lot of that's going to be dependent on what this wide receiver room looks like. I expect them to go pursue a receiver, but you got a stud receiver coming in, Ryan Wingo. Jonte Cook is primed for a breakout year next year when Xavier Worthy leaves and Jay Witt graduates. And, you know, my expectation is that Adonai Mitchell will move on. You know, if anyone knows AD's situation, got a young kid. He certainly had more than enough of a year this year on the field to, you know, put some money in his pocket. But you take a look at DeAndre Moore and Ryan Niblett, 4-star freshmen who are on the roster this year, right? So I think that could play a factor in whether there's going to be a position of need at running back, at wide receiver. I'm looking at, in my mind, defensive line. While Sark's recruited well, you lose Sweat. I'm expecting to lose Byron Murphy. That's my anticipation. So you know you're going to want some beef up the middle. They're really high on Sadara Mitchell. Trill Carter, the Minnesota transfer, is going to graduate. So we'll see what happens there. And of course, everyone wants to know about the quarterback situation, right? So again, I want to make this clear. This is not anything I've heard. I'm just giving you kind of what my gut says. If Quinn's back next year, one of those quarterbacks is going to be gone. The betting money is Malik, right? I mean, Malik is a year ahead of Arch, and, you know, we have heard nothing that Arch Manning is not pleased with his Texas experience, pleased with wanting to play for Steve Sarkisian, and expected as much of what happened this year. With Malik, it's not that Malik, again, from what my feeling is and talking with him when we started 2 games, he's not unhappy, and it wouldn't shock me even if he came back in the spring to compete again. That is if, you know, depending on what happens with Quinn. But I just think Malik's a quarterback, and I'm sure you guys will agree with this. If you take a look at the 2 starts he's had, Malik isn't going to be served by watching anymore. Malik is going to be served by getting reps. And you can only get so many reps in practice. For Malik Murphy to hit his ceiling, his potential, he needs to be on the field. So my anticipation is, given, you know, how we kind of think the quarterback will shake out, that Malik will be the guy who heads elsewhere.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree for sure. But looking past this week, obviously we have to win this week to even get a shot, right? You got to win. We all know that. But, you know, what needs to happen for UT to have a chance to go to the college football playoff? And what would you say to, like, kind of campaign for them? And let me just point one thing out. I said it earlier. You know, the committee favors Oregon, right? They're a really big fan of Oregon, right? What does Texas and Oregon have in common? What one opponent do they have in common? My home ground, Texas Tech, okay? Texas beat Tech by 50. Oregon beat Tech by 8. You know, you can't just look away from that. So what would you say for your campaign for Texas. Obviously, if they win this week, they have to win this week
Go
to
Louisville.
go to the college football playoff.
Big boy said it, right? Well, we know what has to happen, and that's Louisville has to beat Florida State. I mean, that is the big thing. Just let you guys in behind the curtain a little bit. Being a Floridian, the first ever football game I watched, I was 5 years old, 1997 Sugar Bowl. My dad sat me down. It was Florida State, Florida, and I was told we root for the Seminoles. So my dad has been giving me crap every week that his Noles keep hanging on. Now that I went to UCF, my Noles fandom has subsided, but he's been giving me crap every week saying that he's going to keep the horns out. But that's the big thing. And my expectation is Florida State will lose. I mean, God bless them. They found a way to beat Florida with Tate Rodemaker, but they weren't particularly impressive against the Gators. And I think Louisville, especially after suffering that loss against a rival in Kentucky, they're going to look to want to bounce back and improve something in that sense. So I'm expecting Florida State to lose. Now, Coop, you said it, right? I mean, that factor as far as Oregon, Texas, I have made a point not to hop on the post CFP selection show calls of Blue Carrigan and others, to be quite transparent with you. I don't get anything out of them because they don't really say anything. But we do have people who do hop on those calls and ask questions, and I find them kind of pointless. But if I were making the case for Texas, I'm just going to say what Steve Sarkisian said. In my mind, Texas has the most convincing win of the year, the most definitive win of the year. They went to a place that people don't win at. If it were that easy to win at Alabama, everyone would do it. And I feel like this is kind of my opinion, that people are still viewing Alabama through the lens of the team that lost to Texas as opposed to the team that they really kind of rounded into. And Jalen Milroe showed himself to be, pretty darn good quarterback. And I think Alabama, again, they're not the world beaters of, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I think in that sense, people are thinking, all right, that's not that great of a win, but they did it in Tuscaloosa. I'm telling you right now, I'm super impressed with the atmosphere at DKR all year. And especially, Coop, I know you were there, the Texas Tech game, but just being honest with you, that Alabama atmosphere, I mean, it is, if any of you guys ever have the opportunity to go, and of course with Texas going to SEC, maybe go in the future. I don't care if you're up in the upper deck, go to Tuscaloosa. It is a one in a lifetime. I'm sure it'll be similar to what we see next year at Michigan. So for that team to go into Tuscaloosa and win the way they did, that's the best win in college football. If that can at least get them to 4, if some things shake out in their favor, then I maybe I'll hop on one of those calls and actually listen.
Well, not only they won by double digits too. So it wasn't like they just squeaked it out. I mean, they won by double digits. So
no doubt. Well, with speaking of that, we've been talking about it, and we're very interested on your thoughts of, obviously you see all these scenarios on how certain things could play out. So we wanted to see what your thoughts would be on this scenario for the 5-team and who would get left out in this situation. And you have Michigan, obviously 13-0 Big Ten champ. You got Alabama, 12-1 SEC champ. You got Oregon, 12-1 Pac-12 champ. You got the Horns, 12-1 Big 12 champ. And then you have Florida State winning somehow 13-0 ACC champ.
Well, then okay, so
You got Georgia.
I mean, that means Georgia's they lose, but they're 12-1. Washington 12-1.
Yeah. No, I mean, I Washington's out for sure. I hate to say it, but I think Texas probably ends up out, just because I think this is me trying to get a read for what I think that committee is doing. I think they're going to give a tide. And plus we have precedent for this, right? There's precedent for an SEC championship game loser making the college football playoff. So I think in that sense, it's hard for me. It's hard because I'm trying to think logically, but also think through the eyes of the committee, right? Which are two different things. Because if it's me, I think Oregon should be the odd man out. But I think if you take a look at the precedent, I think Texas ends up being out and Georgia, so it'll be Texas and Washington out. Georgia finds a way back in just because, I mean, I don't think they're going to discount. If my memory serves me correct, when Alabama made it and they lost, they were coming off of, if my memory serves me correct, they're coming from the national championship. I think that was the year they're coming off a national championship, but Georgia's coming off a 2.
Yep.
So I think in that sense, they're going to, no, pun intended, they're going to give the tide to Georgia.
Yeah.
Didn't Bama end up winning it?
And yeah, I think Bama ended up winning it. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they ended up winning the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it'd be interesting. I saw they said there's never been a 7 or 8 seed at this point in the rankings ever make the playoff. So, I mean, there could definitely be some movement there, and could be the first time. But obviously, basketball now. We talked a little bit about it last time with you right before the season kind of got going. It's in full swing. Team is 5-1. What are your thoughts on the team so far this year in those 6 games? Obviously, matchup Thursday night that you'll be at. And then also any injury updates on Disu and big man Cedric.
Yeah, so I'll work in reverse here. So Caden, the big thing when you watch him, and first off, as far as his health, he seems fine. He played 27 or 26 minutes a few nights ago in the win. I think the big thing with Caden is you can tell if you play for Virginia, that's a defensive-minded team. Tony Bennett is a defensive-minded coach. He's getting his hands in the passing lanes of a lot of things. I think he's second on team in steals, but you can tell he's a little hesitant to put his shoulders up and block shots. I think that's going to come with time. But his shoulder, for what we're told, and we had a Zoom presser today with RT and Dylan Mitchell, is that the shoulder's fine. It's just a matter of it's mental. Once he realized the fact that, he can throw his arms around in terms of blocking shots and really swatting things, the shoulder's going to hold up, he'll be fine. Disu, I'm still feeling as if Disu is going to be ready by the time conference play starts. It was the incarnate word game, if memory serves me correct, when I went out, and I usually get to Moody Center 2 hours before the game so I can watch the guys warm up. Disu was warming up, but not full go. He was taking part in some pick and roll scenarios on defense and, kind of some pick and roll things on offense. But you can tell he's still hesitant, right? He's not fully going out there. He's just kind of getting himself back into making basketball movements. So I think the big thing, especially the conditioning as well, you're out that long. Even with Shedrick has said, like, playing the way that UT plays as opposed to the way Virginia plays, which they're walking the ball up in the half court, he's getting winded, having to run up back and forth. So I think that's going to be a big thing with Disu. Now, overall with the team, defense is going to be the main thing. I think 6 games in, we can tell the team's going to score. They're going to find a way to put 80 points on the board, whether it's Max Asmus, who finally broke out the other night. He had a great shooting game, had 20-something points. Whether it's, Tyrese Hunter putting in 12, or, Dylan Mitchell's offensive game is starting to show up a little bit. He's been a force on the boards as well. He had a big game against Louisville in that Empire Classic. So they're going to find a way to put points on the board. But defensively, we saw what happened against Louisville. That's the one that really kind of surprised me, because no disrespect to the Cards, but this ain't the Louisville of, Rick Pitino days. They went 4-28 last year or something like that, right? They were not good. Obviously, they're taking some steps in the right direction, but I didn't expect, UT to get pushed the way they did by Louisville. Now, in terms of UConn, it's a double-edged sword. You're playing the defending national champs, and they've reloaded with some guys, and they're really pushing, but they didn't have Shedrick. And I wonder what that game looks like with Shedrick and Disu out there. So just kind of, my thoughts are, again, defensively, this team's has to come together. I asked RT on the Zoom presser today, I said, hey, do you kind of have like a time period in which you need to know by game, 15 games in, this is where we are defensively, and then I need to switch some things up? And he said, no. He said, listen, I want them to win their on-ball matchups defensively. I want them to win their ball screen matchups defensively, and then we'll take it from there. He doesn't expect them necessarily, need them to be at a certain point at a certain time in the year. He thinks it's going to be a work in progress all season. And I think a big part of that is just because of the fact they got so many newcomers, right? So we'll see what happens there. But listen, this is a UT team that's going to score points. That I feel solid about. For
sure. Well, we got one more question for you, and it comes from one of our fans today. We posted that we were having you on the show again, which we can't appreciate you enough for coming on again prior to the championship weekend. It's big weekend, busy schedule. But the one question was, and it's still on the basketball side of things. You just talked about the 2 guys when they're fully healthy come hopefully conference play, mid-conference play. How do you see Disu and Shedrick sharing minutes, or splitting minutes, you could say?
That is a really good question. So I'm going to answer it like this. If Dessou gets back before conference play, I think there's a possibility you can slide him in, slide Brock Cunningham out of the starting lineup. If it's any later than that, I think you got to let these guys kind of gel as is. So that's Brock Cunningham, Dylan Mitchell, Caden Shedrick, and of course, Ace Smith and Tyrese Hunter as the guards. How do I see them sharing minutes? It wouldn't shock me that even if Dessou doesn't start, they'll find a way to get, when it's closing time, when it's winning time, to get Shedrick and Dessou on the floor together. And it's not any slight on Brock. I mean, Brock is everyone knows what Brock Cunningham brings as far as, a guy who's relentless, going to be all over the court. But he's Brock says he's listed at 6'6". He's 6'4", right? Like, I mean, I guess in sneakers, he's probably 6'5". That height matchup, right? That I think is really going to play a big difference. We saw UConn take advantage of it in that Empire Classic. So whether or not Dessou starts, I think it depends on when he gets back. But in the latter stages of the game, I'm expecting it to be Shedrick and Dessou. And just because both of them, it's not like Shedrick is a guy who is just an offensive guy and defensively is a liability. No, as soon as he gets that confidence back, he's going to be a defensive presence as well. So they both can share the floor together with even a Dylan Mitchell, and that gives you a lot of length with Ace Smith and Hunter out there.
No doubt. And hopefully, I mean, that's kind of always been the thing with this team so far. I feel like this year is you can't really make any too strong judgments about them until they do get back to full form. And that's probably hopefully start a conference play, if not mid-conference play. So we'll see what happens there. But
they're all just not used to playing with each other. So they're still going to have to gel. I mean, the whole team is different. So, 2 or 3 guys came back. So
that's a big thing. No doubt about it.
No doubt. Well, safe travels to Arlington this weekend. Hopefully, Saturday proves out to be good, and then Sunday with the selection show, hopefully they can do the Longhorns right and get you traveling to a semifinal game for playoffs. So that'd be pretty sweet there. But man, we appreciate you coming on with us again.
No, anytime, fellas. I mean, listen, I got to get up early tomorrow. I actually got to head over to Moody for the women's game because, they're going to play UConn Sunday. So I got to show up a little bit, for the women's game. But listen, like I told you guys, anytime, just give me a little bit of heads up and I'll make the schedule work, and always happy to hop on with y'all.
Yes, sir. And
Thank you, man.
if y'all aren't tuning in, make sure to tune in to Horns 24/7, Chip Brown, Eric Henry, all the guys over there. So we appreciate it, man.
No doubt, fellas. Y'all take care.
See ya.
Thank you.
And that is Eric Henry, senior writer from Horns 24/7. Man, he's always
Second
bringing
time.
that.
Almost a regular guest.
Yeah, he's bringing that juice.
Yeah.
He's always got all the answers, man. And I always see him getting a lot of credit for the questions he mentioned, the questions he asked Rodney Terry or Sark. I always see on Twitter that he always gets credit for asking certain questions that guys are, like he mentioned in the first time he came on, maybe they're just a little scared to ask. So he's a great dude, really doing it over there at Horns 24/7, but I'm glad we were able to bring him on again for Tuesday on the Edge this time though. So that was great.
Awesome
But-
show.
Yep. Well, before we wrap up this Tuesday on the Edge, we got anything else looking into a little preview of this Friday's episode, guys? Anything you're looking forward to in this coming week?
Just looking forward to Florida State losing and us winning. And I don't know, man. Last week was so close. Florida had them. Washington State should have beat Washington. It was just like all right there. And in a 5-minute period, it was all gone. I was like, shit, But hey, I'm proud of the Horns. I think they did great against Tech. And I think, unfortunately, now I think they're, like Eric said, playing those 4-quarter games. And unfortunately, it's coming at the very end. But if we can get away with this thing with a Big 12 championship, I mean, if we would have said that at the beginning of the year, all of us would have taken it. So, the guys got one more game to take care of business and win a championship, hopefully. Then we'll see what happens.
We were there. We got to visit that trophy room. There's a little empty. We need to There's some
We
room.
need
We can
another
we can
Big
put a
12 in
trophy
there. Maybe, one of those.
We can maybe put a for sure Big 12 trophy in there. And maybe a natty.
Or
Move those a little to the side. Put that new one right there.
or even just some other bowl trophy that's not a freaking Alamo Bowl for once. So,
Yeah.
because that's looking very promising not to be in that, whether they make the playoff or not. But remember to tune in to this Friday's episode of the Sports Roundtable Trio Edition coming out at noon. We're going to have all kinds of picks for you. Of course, a little bit more look into the matchups going into the football weekend. And then we're also going to have a nice roundtable chat, bringing that back this week with a little different. He's a senior in high school. So we're going to get his recruiting process as he's going through it now and his outlook on the college coming up very soon. But with that, remember to subscribe, like, and share. And what else?
Big boy.
Is Kobe coming back?
Yeah, he should be coming back. Yep.
All right. We need
Big
that
boy, what do you
Iowa
do?
pick. Ring that bell.
There you go. Ring that bell, baby.
Ring that bell. Until next time, we'll see you Friday. Have a fantastic rest of the week.
Welcome.
Peace.